Hello and welcome to episode 144 of the Comedy Slab. We are two alien life forms put on Earth to observe you human beings, you listeners. I am Adrian Lacey in the southeast of England. It doesn't get more alien than that. Well, it does actually. The Midlands of England gets more alien, and up there is the alien they call Shane O'Connor.
Nanu.
Very nearly an illegal alien, but I think he just about got the paperwork in time. So what we do is, if you're new to the show, a special welcome, and don't worry, if you're old to the show, an equally special welcome. You've got to keep everyone on board, haven't you, with this podcasting lark? Anyway, essentially we take a different comedy each week. We take it in turns to set each other homework. I set this week's homework, and the reference to aliens is because we're putting on the Comedy Slab to prod it about, see what we make of it, an episode... Series 3, Episode 1, in fact, of Third Rock from the Sun. More on that in a little while. But essentially, it's all about our view on the day, personal opinion of a comedy, which we try to imbibe not once but twice to make sure that we try and neutralise some prejudices. I wouldn't claim that they all go, having aired a prejudice last week, which is completely irrational. Have a listen to last week's show, Whites, for our review of Whites, that is, for more details. Anyway, we've had a little bit, or actually a lottle bit, of flattery from Facebook, have we not? Very alliterative, that is.
Yeah. What was the prejudice like? Was that when you said?
Oh, I didn't want to rake over old coals, but since you forced me to it, held a microphone to my head, it's my irrational lack of warming to Alan Davis.
Oh yeah, don't bring that up. His solicitors have been on.
You're rotten.
Don't.
You wouldn't let it lie.
Yeah, we've had his. Well, it was his solicitor actually. He said, "Did we want to buy his house?" But no, but that, it's no, don't. Let's draw the veil under that.
Moving on. Nothing to see.
No, we had some lovely praise, comments, feedback. Call it what you will. We had a note from a guy called Ewan on our Facebook page. I must admit, it took me a bit by surprise. I mean, it was just so nice. He said, "Hello, gents." He said, "Just a quick message to say, I love the podcast. It's refreshing to find a review show that doesn't tell you what to think of a show. I love that you can cover new and older shows along with radio as well. It's a great mix, and I love the little facts that you throw in. The two of you work perfectly together, and it's a pleasure to listen to. I've never been a fan of podcasts," he said, "but I've nearly caught up in the space of a month. So we're going to have to do more than one a week now because Ewan's hot on our trail."
Yes, he's catching us up.
Yeah, it's going to be a problem, isn't it? I think if we don't pull our finger out. But no, I just think it was really nice because we do get. I mean, it was only my wife was only saying the other day I showed her a video on YouTube of something, and she said, Why would 1,000 people click on the thumbs down for that? She said, if you don't like it, why don't they just walk on? I said, I don't know. I don't know. And then
that wasn't our show, was it?
No. Well, actually, no. Better go back and check now.
Yeah.
But yeah, no. It's quite interesting, isn't it? And very often people. This is the one thing that just like kind of think, oh dear, it's so sad. People say, well, you can't say what's funny and what isn't funny. No, I know we're not saying that. We're only saying what's funny and what isn't funny to us.
Yeah.
And singularly at that as well. I'm saying what's funny and isn't funny to me, and you're doing it for you.
Yeah.
And you kind of think it was just refreshing that somebody actually got it for a change.
Great.
I thought it was really, yeah, it was nice.
Spread the word, please. Ewan Balshaw. Very nice to hear from you. And of course, any other compliments that you're sitting on at the moment, feel free to express. And by the by, since you mentioned Facebook, we are naturally enough at Comedy Slab. That's our the handle for our page on Facebook. If you could, give a thumbs up rather than a thumbs down, that would be rather nice. And also on Twitter, we are likewise at Comedy Slab. Do follow us there.
I mean, failing that, if you got a nice comment, and you want the best way to do it out of all of those actually is if you just write it on the white spaces on a £50 note, and just post them onto us, because that's probably the quickest way to get them read out as well, isn't it?
I think it virtually guarantees it, although I prefer £100 notes, which I'm assured exist. Never seen one, never owned one.
I didn't know there was one. Yeah, I'd have mentioned it if I did.
Why stop at a mere 50? Anyway, we like to, as Ewan sort of made reference to there, other facts and figures and things we do. We just before we put this week Third Rock from the Sun, or at least an episode of that, onto the notional comedy Slab and See Who Salutes, and prod it with the equally notional and virtual Scalpels. A bit of comedy news we like to throw in each week. This week, I've just seen unseen Victoria Wood scripts to be published. That's a reference to a TV show title from years ago, As Seen on TV. I always think we'll get to a point, and I don't ever want to get there, don't get me wrong, where everything will have been found in everyone's loft. Every tape, every document, every show, whatever it is. You'd think we'd reach a point where they'd all been found, wouldn't you? But I'm glad that, don't get me wrong, I'm glad week to week we find something new, whether it's an old score by Mozart or, in this case, unseen Victoria Wood scripts.
It's difficult to know what to do with them, isn't it, with these? I always... And I think in the... Wasn't it big in the 80s? You'd have books of scripts of shows and people would have them, and I'm not really quite sure what they ever did with them, but they had them and it was something that they kept. You'd have some Monty Python sketches or something like that.
Well, that would even go back to the previous decade. I remember at school in the 70s, people... but I think it... Actually, no, I might be confusing it with the LPs were out in the 70s. Maybe the scripts came a bit later, but yeah.
And I was never really sure, I'm still not sure now, what people do with them really, or what they want them for, or... I mean, I suppose with the ones that have never been on TV, it's slightly different, isn't it? I very often think, it's the ones that, you have seen on TV, and it's the script for the show that you know, for example. And you think, well, why would you do that? Because if you wanted to relive that, you'd watch the episode. But this being slightly different, as much as they were never published. But and then of course, if the other thing is, well, then you try and make them. Mm-hmm. Which is just fraught with danger anyway, isn't it? You kind of think, you're never on a winner with that, are you?
Well, people might do it, like Victorians gathered round the family piano. People might, I don't come from a normal family, but you could see the trends early on. We'd record.
Honestly,
I can see him shaking his head on Skype.
I'm just so shocked by that. You don't come from a normal family.
Good job you're sitting down, mate, isn't it? May I continue?
Yes.
Instead of writing to some people, I remember one year we, it was friends of my parents who then became godparents to my sister, for instance. So they stayed in touch, but the friends moved to South Africa, or actually what was Rhodesia first. The lengths people go to avoid the Lacey family, it's quite incredible, isn't it?
Yeah.
But to sort of pass on our news, instead of writing a long screed or having one of those copied letters that you might put a little scribble on at the bottom to personalise it, we recorded a little show. I imagine a certain Lacey Jr., name of Adrian, had something to do with why it would be recorded as opposed to written. But I remember going out in the cold. This was, it was to get there for Christmas, so it was a cold... So that's when we used to have winters, if anyone remembers. And I distinctly remember me with my tape recorder approaching Mum, Dad, and my sister, singing carols at the door. And then we did I've lost you, haven't I, Shane? I think he's getting on the phone to various psychological societies. But I then approached them, so you got this perspective of the singing getting louder, and then the door opens, effects door. They did this for real. This is not pretending. I was not done with sound effects afterwards. I didn't have the sophistication then, and then notionally we were letting ourselves into their home, and that's how we did it.
See, and I thought we were pushing the boat out by putting a threepenny bit in a Christmas pudding. It just shows you, doesn't it, really?
I hope you cleaned it first. Otherwise, that would account for a lot.
I just really feel sorry for the people at the other end.
Knowing what to make.
How are we going to reply to this now? We're going to have to hire an aeroplane with a banner on the back or something. It's like.
Anyway, just a quick mention to finishing off this comedy news. This book isn't out till October, so lots of time to get excited or overexcited about it. But it is called Victoria Wood Unseen on TV. It's being compiled by Jasper Rees, who wrote Victoria Wood's biography with the title that refers to her probably best known song, Let's Do It. And the publisher is, I'm sure you're desperate to know, Trapeze. And it's going to run to 320 pages. So that should keep you happy over Christmas rather than recording shows. Although we'll be recording shows over Christmas, no doubt.
We're relentless, aren't we? Relentless.
We are. Now, 2, The Matter in Hand. Third Rock from the Sun. As I say, Series 3, Episode 1. Essentially, it's a bunch of... I can't stand that term, a bunch of... fist of fives or whatever. Yeah. It's an Americanism that's creeping in even into my mouth.
Wasn't the famous line from, I think it was John Cleese, was it? They were saying they were going to America, Python. The whole lot of them were on a plane, and Terry Gilliam, the American amongst them, went, "Hey guys, look down there. There's a whole bunch of water."
That's where it gets silly. Anyway, that aside, the show's essentially about. The actors appear to be human because that's how actors generally are, and that's part of the charm and the joy of it. But they are, in fact, alien life forms observing the human race and also being in human form themselves. They're kind of discovering things about themselves. I remember I almost wanted to slab this episode that I remember most well, but then I thought, no, that's me going back to old ground. Might as well explore a new one. Or a new old one. They started in 1996. There was one with sneezing, and the gag was the sneezing was shall we say, almost erotic the way they were experiencing it.
Because that comes out of truth, doesn't it? Because isn't a sneeze the same muscular contraction as an orgasm?
You could say that. I haven't done the research. Have you been studied by Masters and Johnson then?
No, I just
or
had
just
a terrible,
Johnson and Johnson.
Had a terrible cold recently, and I've had time of my life.
You enjoyed
yeah,
time with your wife. Good to hear. We're all very pleased for you. Anyway, another little feature that I've wheedled into the Comedy Slab, almost without you noticing, apart from the fact I refer to it each time. Did you come to this with some trepidation? Were you a fan of the show? Is it new to you, despite being over 20 years old?
Well, I wouldn't say I was a fan. I seem to remember, wasn't this part of the Friday night Channel 4 pub fare, or home from the pub fare, I should say, when the Channel 4 used to put stuff on at about 11 till about 12, 1 o'clock, something like that.
I think 2 half hours back to back, yeah.
Yeah, to attract people to come in from the last orders crowd, as it were. Wasn't it part of that? Didn't it?
I've got a feeling you're right. It has been 23, 24 years, and I never tended to go out on the Raz on a Friday, or I'm not. Neither of us are great drinkers, but of course, you don't have to do that to qualify to watch the TV show.
No, I wouldn't say I was a fan, but I have recollections of watching more than a handful of episodes of this. Probably not the best praise you can give it, having sat through it, having come back from the pub with a mate and, put the telly on. Yeah.
Well, it saves having to talk to the mate, doesn't it? So
I got absolutely loaded before I watched it.
Well, this time I'm imagining you watched it stone cold sober. We've got 2 audio clips from the show, in case you're not familiar with it, or a little memory jogger if you are. And this revolves around, well, the whole show. I mean, the star of the show by a long chalk is John Lithgow, who plays Dick. So essentially, they're a sort of false family. They're not, as I recall, it's not. Some things are sort of assumed in this show, but anyway, they live as a family, the Solomon family, and he's the sort of the head of the household in an old-fashioned style, and he's fallen for a woman by the name of Mary. That's a real human, as opposed to an alien life form posing as a human. But there is a bit of a conflict to come, which we'll we'll discover a bit later on in the show. Anyway, we see how sweet they are with each other when Mary, who is, if I remember correctly, a professor, she's a doctor actually, but a sort of academic doctor, she's got a little treat for Dick, who is in the bedroom.
Dick, are you all right?
Oh, Mary, I had another one of those horrible dreams.
Well, what happened?
We were getting married.
Thank you.
No, that was the good part. But then my family showed up.
Oh, don't tell me. They objected.
Well, they had issues.
It's all right. I've prepared a short speech just in case they did. It's just basically 2 words, and one of them's off.
I think I made a big mistake. I should never have let them go off without me. On vacation.
Well, until they get back, can't we just enjoy our time alone?
Alone?
Dick, are you having second thoughts about us?
About us? Oh, no, Mary, I don't know what I'd do without you. You're the only thing keeping me sane.
Oh, it's a full-time job. I'm going to get ready for work, you crazy lug.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what to say. It's the interesting thing was that I made a number of observations in the first couple of scenes when I was doing my notes.
Yeah.
And then I watched some interviews of John Lithgow and Jane Curtin, the lady that you heard there, and
Playing Mary.
Yeah, and all the things that I'd observed were actually things that they said, which I was quite pleased with myself actually that I'd kind of identified it as I had.
What sort of things?
Well, it's very theatrical was the thing that struck me the most, and Lithgow makes reference to it in a number of interviews and says that he said we were very theatre-based actors. And it was very early on. It was decided that it was going to be done in a very theatrical way, in a very kind of overblown sort of way. And I mean that sort of comes across straight away. The fact that it's very farcy as well, isn't it? It's a kind of "Oops, Mrs. Miggins, where's my trousers?" running in and out of rooms kind of thing. It's got that feel to it as well, hasn't it? I think really. But before we get too deep into this, shall I give you my headline? I thought of 2 actually. I made myself laugh because I thought of another one while I was listening to that clip as well.
Isn't the first rule of comedy don't laugh at your own gags?
It is, I suppose, unless you've just thought of it yourself and thought, when they said, "Why do you laugh?" So I've never heard it before. No, it was just that kind of, let me tell you, and you can decide. My headline was going to be, if I didn't like it, was going to be Turd Rock.
You can answer the correspondence. Okay.
Oh, I do.
It can only get better. Well, the implication of the way you set that up is that you do like it. But
well, if I didn't like it a lot, I should have said then. Maybe that's a better way of describing it.
Okay.
I went for, as a headline, the nicer, "It's all alien to me."
Oh dear. You didn't hate it, but you certainly didn't buy into it.
I think that's a really succinct way of describing how I felt about it.
Okay.
I didn't hate it, and I understand why a lot of people like it, and a lot of people do like it. I mean, I've seen a number of Americans on various platforms describe it as the best comedy they've ever seen, which I think is a little bit of hyperbole, but yeah, it's got a huge following, huge fan base, or it did have when it was out. Well, I think it still has as well. What about you? I mean, were you middling with? I mean, you were really having a good old titter there, weren't you?
Yes. Well, it was not ever thus. I did like it first time around. I never saw 6 series, and I don't know actually whether Channel 4 bought them all. But I remember following it probably for a season at least. And really enjoying it. And so, cut to 23 or so years later, Do you mind pulling that expression?
You followed it for a season. There's about 20 episodes in a season.
Okay,
You've watched 20 episodes of anything.
Well, that was before the days of my Unitarianism, which, for the sake of our newbies, that means I just watch one show of a series and think, yeah, I've got it. I know the formula. Move on. Life is short. Yeah. Well, life is considerably shorter than it was 23 years ago, to the tune of about, 23 years. So... I was a different person then, and that is a clue to the oddness I felt after watching it for the first time. So thank goodness for the second viewing, which I was saying we try and do, or second listen in the case of radio or audio podcasts. But I really grappled with it because so much has changed in those 23 years. Internally and externally, by which I mean I'm a different person. As we've gathered, I've become a Unitarian in that time. But also, of course, you referred to the theatricality. Well, of course, that comes from nothing less than, and nothing more than, the studio audience being present, which brings us back to the old canard that we're forever referring to, which is, how relatively rare that is now, which has given birth to what I call the smile com, whereby you don't have to have gag after gag after gag, performing, as we saw last week, again referring to Whites, although there's many other shows I could refer to, where everything is subdued. There's nothing. It wouldn't sustain. I don't think you could perform that large, as John Lithgow does in what we've just heard, in something that didn't have a studio audience. That would just fall flat, wouldn't it?
I always worry, I think you're right, but I always worry when playing large becomes a substitute for more gags or a tighter script or more volume, more content, and you think, well, if we just, and he and I can't think of an example, but there was something in that clip there, if we run it back, he kind of shouts things that, if he'd have just said them, wouldn't have been. Well, they weren't funny when he shouted them, but they weren't gags in a way. They were
you're delivering that as an eternal truth. That is, we come back to personal opinions. But yeah, when Glenda Jackson, who'd only done straight acting, forgive me for I referred to this, but it's some episodes ago, when she asked Eric Morecambe, having not done much, if any, comedy acting before she appeared on the Morecambe and Wise show, which would have been the Christmas show, I think, one of the big ones, playing Cleopatra, of course, famously in that sequence. Google it if you can, if copyright allows. She said, well, how do you play for laughs? And Eric said two things, very simple. You say it louder and faster. And Lithgow follows that. That's part of the theatricality.
I take issue with the fact that my point is, you're saying, oh, well, that's personal opinion, that it's not funny. No, what I'm actually saying is he's actually shouting lines in a kind of exclamatory way that aren't jokes. They're not the punchline of jokes. They're exclamations. They're not. Even the writers would say, no, it wasn't meant to be funny, but it's his delivery that makes the audience... the audience just love it. I can only assume that the bar was open for a very long time before they started to record.
Well, do we know for a fact, I'm trying to find out on the old IMDb, that, as I hope it is the case, and a gut feeling is it's a live studio audience, but do we know that for a fact?
No, yeah, I've seen recordings. I watched some. Right. I watched some behind the scenes stuff.
Lithgow wouldn't want to appear without, would he?
No, the fact that they got him to do it, and it was quite. He tells the story about he went to. I think he had a lunch with the creators of the show, and who were a husband and wife couple, aren't they? I forget their names now. But
I'll tell you in a moment. Carry on.
He went to lunch with them. And he said, and what I didn't know was, he said that he said, I thought, I just got to try and get out of this, and kind of turn them down politely, have a nice lunch, because he was friends with them anyway, so he knew them, kind of thing. He said, I never intended to be in it, he said. And when they got to the bit where they said that we're all aliens, he said, they kind of thought they didn't want to tell him that bit. But that was the bit that kind of intrigued him, and he went, "Oh, okay, go on then," and that's how he ended up being in it. But the fact that he's in it in the first place is a massive coup anyway, isn't it, really, as you say, because, he's an actor of some standing, isn't he?
Yeah. Well, by the way, the writers you're referring to are I misread it as Bonnie Tyler, but it's Bonnie Turner and Terry Turner.
Yeah.
And then other writers. So there's 4 writing credits in all. Well, that's the creation credit, the Turners, and then the writing credit, if this is correct, Mark Brazil and Bob Cushel.
That's right. But, I mean, Bonnie and Terry Turner are quite interesting because they were on the staff writing team of Saturday Night Live, which in its heyday, some would say, 86 to 92, they were staff writers on that. But they were responsible for films like, I don't know if you remember, Dan Aykroyd film called Coneheads. That was another sci-fi
I'm just looking at that. It makes me smile to see the poster that accompanies it. Yeah.
Wayne's World 2... the Brady Bunch movie, that was a remake thing, wasn't it? Third Rock, of course. And that 70s show, which, again, you can actually touch the similarities between Third Rock and that 70s show from what I've seen of that. And I've only seen that quite briefly. But, yeah. So, again, I mean, by the time they came to write this, well-accomplished writers... well connected in the industry, but yeah, to get Lithgow in, it was. I mean, the whole cast. I have to say again, it's one of those, isn't it? Where I don't know whether you agree, but I thought the cast were just bob on. They were just great.
Bob
fantastic.
On. Is that a Birminghamism?
I think it's an East Midlands thing, actually.
Okay. Well, I'm happy to fall in with it. Yeah.
I'm trying to get in with the culture here. That's all it is. It's
Because you're alien to the Midlands, right? No, you're not. Kristen Johnston as Sally Solomon. I mean, John Lithgow is 6'4", and she must be not far off. So they're both sort of physically big presences on screen, aren't they?
Yeah, I had a look at some of the stuff that she'd done previously, and there were a lot of films with Amazonian in the title.
Funny that. And they're all available on Amazon as well, strangely enough. And also, did you notice, I'm sure you did, because you do your homework, a certain Ian Lithgow appearing?
It's his son, isn't it? Yeah.
It's his son, yeah.
I thought it was interesting, because I had a look at like some of them from Series 1 as well. And Joseph Gordon-Levitt, who plays Tommy, who's the youngest crew member, he's a very young lad when he started out, and I'd forgotten how young he was. I mean, he was a kid when he started.
Well, yeah. But his presence was beyond his years, I think. Well, you've said a strong cast, and I fall in with that. What do you think of French Stewart, who plays Harry Solomon? Of the 4 of these aliens, he's the one who actually is acting really alien. It's interesting that they only allow one of them to be, just you would if you had to single out one of them for acting weird deliberately, it would be him, surely, wouldn't it?
I read somewhere that there was some error or something supposedly, and that he'd only got a cerebral cortex. He hadn't actually got a brain, and that's why his character is like he is.
Right.
So he's like running on diminished abilities, I think is probably the best way of describing it.
Okay.
I mean, I love the way he interprets that, and I always remember thinking he was, to me, I mean, despite the fact they're a great cast, I think I would, if you had to edge it, I'd say he was a standout member. He's a bit of a scene stealer, I think.
Well, I find him standout, but I don't find it necessarily for the right reasons. In my view, but hey. We'll agree to disagree on that.
What do you think? Too overdone then, or?
Yeah, but even saying that, I think it's restrained in the sense it's only one person like that. So I'm sort of semi-demolishing my own argument, but I find it annoying. But then some things, particularly comedy scripts, are meant to be annoying, aren't they? I mean, again, referring to last week's show, you just wanted to thump. Was it Skews? Was his name?
Skews, yeah.
Skews.
Yeah.
And that was the point of it. So as long as people don't actually thump the actor in the street, because people very often can't distinguish, can they? It's not always. Some of our fellow life forms aren't always. They might be missing the odd cortex. But hey, there's one person in the cast who is a special guest who we haven't mentioned so far, and we're about to hear if we're ready to move on to our second audio clip. What did you make of a certain Roseanne Barr?
Well, what a shock! First of all, I didn't really quite until I checked it. I didn't quite get it was her straight away. It was. It was a long time ago, quite obviously. First of all, but I thought. I know her face. Did you get her straight?
I didn't. No, I didn't. It only takes a hairstyle to throw me, and whether or not it was a wig, but she fell in beautifully with this sort of, I suppose, an alien's idea of what the perfect wife is. If they'd done a little bit of research, certainly, I would say a 1950s wife, who chained to the kitchen sink kind of thing. So it was a two-edged sword, but it was meant to be. She had to be a contrast, I guess, with Mary, who is Dick's true love, who, as I say, she's a university professor. So, you didn't want another university professor, otherwise, I suppose the gag wouldn't have worked. But, quite a coup for them to get her. But there was a period where, she fell from grace, didn't she? Do you remember that incident involving a certain singing of a certain song?
No, I remember that she did fall from grace. Didn't she fall from grace a couple of times? Didn't they try and cancel her recently? Is that what you're talking about?
Possibly. I'm going back some time, but I don't remember. I suspect it was before this appearance. She sang the American national anthem, "Oh Say Can You See," and all that, in a funny comedic voice. Which is akin to third-degree murder, I think, in the States. It's a criminal offence.
It used to be. I'm not sure it is now. I think they'd have Wednesday nights, flag burning night, ain't normally now. So
between 6:30 and 8:30.
And if you don't do it, then they buy you one and a lighter.
and they supply the soundtrack from.
Full Metal Jacket.
Jimi Hendrix, I was thinking of. Playing with his teeth, no doubt. But no, do you remember the PR swim back, the furious fight back? Which is probably true, but it was the juxtaposition. It was almost like so. There's nothing funny about her saying, I think it was something about being abused as a child or something like that. But it was the juxtaposition. I sang it in a funny way because I was abused as a child. So, cut me some slack kind of thing.
Right.
Let's turn to our second clip in which we hear Roseanne. She's sort of called Janet, but it's sort of not quite her name. In fact, even in the cast listing on IMDb, it says on the one side they have the column with the real names or the actors' names, stage names, if that's what they are, Roseanne Barr, and on the other side it says Janet, but in brackets as Roseanne. So there is a certain amount of confusion, but she is this sort of stereotypical 50s housewife, as I say.
I think that what that means actually is when it says as Roseanne, it means that's how she was credited. She wasn't credited on the thing as Roseanne Barr.
Oh, well, actually on the credit, yes.
Yeah,
that would make sense. So, but if you hear her referred to as Janet, then that's what the family have decided she is.
Don't you think Janet is the 1950s housewife name?
It probably, yeah, it is. I think it's in as much, no offence to any Janets listening, and other decades are available for Janets, but because I know at least one.
But if you are a 1950s model Janet, then
I don't want to tell anyone they're a cliche or a stereotype. That's not fair. We're all individuals, but apart from me, obviously. We each think we're different when in fact we're all clones. Anyway, rather than dig an even bigger hole, Dick has decided to talk straight to Janet because, of course, his true love and his heart lies elsewhere, not with her.
Good morning, dear. I'm just putting the finishing touches on your lunch.
Oh,
Wow, Dick, you look terrible.
no, I feel even worse.
Why? What's wrong?
All night long, Janet kept trying to touch my wacky place. I wound up sleeping behind the TV. All I could think of was how much I wanted to be with Mary.
You gotta give Janet a chance.
I don't gotta do nothing. Janet,
Yes, dear.
You know this whole thing where I'm supposed to be your husband and you're supposed to be my wife?
Of course.
Well, it's never going to work out. And the sooner we face up to that, the happier we'll be. There now. Don't you feel better?
What's happening? I'm all wet.
Oh, no, stop. Don't do that. No, stop.
I'm leaking!
Oh, it's fine, honey. It's normal. Just go dry your eyes and we'll shop for shoes, okay?
You cannot talk to her like that. We'll all get incinerated. Well, I think we all love Mary enough to make that sacrifice. Am I right?
No!
Well, I do.
I do wonder whether it's a little bit. I don't know whether childish is too harsh. Maybe juvenile. You know, when a lot of the comedy comes out of this, she touched my wacky place, and
I'm sorry, I'm obviously a kid because I laughed.
Yeah, well, yeah, no. I mean, if that's
I'm not as sophisticated as you. I think people would have worked that out. But could you, at any level, enjoy that? Even the child in you, if there is somewhere in that harsh exterior a wee child.
I had a real strange time with this because, as I say, I didn't come away thinking that needs to be put to the sword. There's something that makes me have a soft spot for it. I don't know what it is. Because I look at the sum of the parts and I think I'm not a fan. But there's also something about it that makes me think, but I can't hate it. I don't know what it is. I don't know how to describe it other than that. I don't know whether it's the cast. I don't know whether it's certainly not the writing. I mean, you know, behave yourself or we'll have you sucked back to your home planet, or I'd rather be sucked. You know, is it a family show? I'm guessing it wasn't, but I don't know. But
I would have thought it is because for something to be family oriented, there only has to be one clean reading of every line, doesn't there? Clearly, you've gone straight to the possible subtext, right? Yeah. Well, we can put off the evil hour no longer and find out whether your score is where your mouth is. We score each of these shows personal opinion only for one episode on one day only, and we mark them out of 5 each and get a total out of 10 if we do the sums correct. I've got a feeling it may be my turn to go first. But I'm going to be very boring, really, because it's going to be the Lacey default of 3.5. But it's it's the quality thing. It's not massive wow. Thank goodness, though, I watched it, as I say, more than once, because the first time through, I was just adjusting. It was like an alien life form to me, and also my memory of myself 23 years ago, and sitting down, you know, when we used to watch linear TV when it went out. Remember those days?
Yeah.
There was this disconnect in my mind, and once I'd adjusted to that and accepted, right, it's of that age, and I was of that age, and what do I think of it now, and can I enjoy it as an example of a classic studio sitcom, of which there's far less now. Who saw the smile coming? I didn't really, but of course The Office started all of that. 3.5 out of 5. Enjoyed it. It might have to be a Unitarian experience unless I can find the famous sneeze episode again.
There's a lot of episodes, aren't there? Like I say, a season was about 22 episodes. So there's a lot of back catalogue to wander through if you do want to try and find that. For me, don't hate me, Third Rock from the Sunners. Well, if you are, you are. If you do, you do. I can only tell you what I think about it, and that's what I'm saying here. I'm not saying don't watch it. I'm not saying it's bad. I'm just saying that for me, out of 5, it was a 2.
Not as bad as you have been known to give to other shows that don't set you alight. I mean, John Lithgow is for me the beating heart of it, and the energy you can hear in those 2 clips. But imagine a whole show's worth of that. I think, you can say it's overblown, but actually, I think for me it works. So yeah. So what's that? 5.5, just over half marks. 5.5 out of 10.
Can I just say before we finally leave Third Rock, one of the great things that I saw in a Lithgow interview, he was asked why he thought Third Rock from the Sun was successful, and he said he thought it was unique. Although he then went on to name check Mork and Mindy in a little bit later on in the interview. But he said, he references the manic energy, and he said we were trying to do what Monty Python had done. I'll say it as he said it.
Python.
And Fawlty Towers.
Right.
And he was actually involved, John Lithgow, was involved in the casting. And they were all theatre actors. So
very
that's
interesting.
probably, yeah.
But when you think that's exactly 20 years on from Fawlty Towers, it's interesting that the echoes of that show and Python. Right, what have you got for me, big boy, next week?
Well, we've mentioned this, I think, on more than one occasion.
Two?
If I say to you, back to the radio, and Angus Deaton.
It wouldn't be radioactive.
Oh man, he got it straight at the trap.
Wow! I'm looking forward to this because, well, I'll get into that more next week, but enjoyed it at the time. So hey, it's going to be another gear change though. We're both different people, and it's even longer ago, isn't it?
Yeah, it'd be interesting. I didn't need the rest of the cast. Angus Deaton, Geoffrey Perkins, sadly no longer with us. Michael Fenton Stevens, Helen Atkinson Wood, and Phil Pope, the fabulous composer Phil Pope.
Yeah.
Radioactive. I thought I'd sort of plump for I think there are about 7 series of Radioactive, so I thought I'd go for series 4, episode 4, and because I spent such a long time doing one of various forms, this I thought I'd choose this episode, which is entitled The Breakfast Show.
That will bring back so happy memories for you, I know.
Oh, let's hope. But yes.
Bring it on.
So that's for next week then. Radioactive, episode 4, series 4, The Breakfast Show.
Fantastic. Well, I've already mentioned Twitter and Facebook, so no need to name check them again, but we'd love you to get involved that way. Of course, we'll take any amount of Facebook flattery or wherever else, whatever corner of the interstellar sort of virtual galaxy it comes from. We're only human, despite all outward appearances of our cone heads. And what else? Personal recommendations of the show would be hugely appreciated, not only by us, but we think, in our biased view, by the people you're recommending us to. So get the word out there, please. In person, if that's COVID-friendly, or COVID unfriendly, I should say, and via a Zoom screen or whatever else, if you have to do it that way. And finally, a nice juicy star rating on Apple Podcasts / iTunes would be appreciated, and a few words as well to go along with them. We don't ask much, do we? Okay, we do.
So that's it for us for this time round. Thank you very much for your company. Thank you for all your kind words as well. And for me, well, I'm going to be sucked back to my home planet.
Oh, come on. You can't have it both ways. You can't complain. That's a juvenile line and then steal it for yourself.
Well, I just thought I'd try it out and see whether it's a contextual thing. Maybe
you can jolly well suck that line back into your trap.
It's that football gag reworked, isn't it? You know, I've told you that one, haven't I? Where he said.
Oh yes. Carry on.
He said, now listen, he's a new player to the team. He said, listen, I don't want you to get worried. He said, the gaffer might pull you off at half time. And he said, well, that's great. We only used to get an orange in Newcastle.
The old ones are indeed very old, as are we. Well, I'm going to get into my hoverpod and mow the lawn. No, head off to another planet where perhaps people will be a bit more appreciative, but you never know.
Do you know why? When you said hoverpod, I don't know why, but I thought, do you remember Larry Blackman from Cameo?
No.
The band. Word.
I remember
this big red cod piece.
Did you say pod piece or cod piece?
Do you want to see me in my hoverpod?
And that's it from this hover podcast. No, I don't.